Around this time every year, LG releases a flagship smartphone, and I'm always left with the same question. Is this the year LG comes out with something truly great? For the past few years, LG has made some steady progress, but with this, the new $820 LG G8, no, it just feels like a disappointment. And that's not because it's a bad phone, mind you. It's because LG tried to set it apart from the competition with some ambitious features that honestly just don't help all that much. But we'll get to those. I want to make clear up front that if nothing else, the G8's basics are solid. The G8's body is sleeker than it used to be, and LG managed to do away with a camera bump from its older models in favor of a dual camera that sits flush against the glass. And this is definitely a minimal design, but all of the necessary touches are here. You've got a headphone jack next to the USB-C port on the bottom, a spot for SIM cards and micro SD cards, and a dedicated Google Assistant button just beneath the volume keys. I really dig this new, more streamlined look, but this just might be the most slippery phone I've used in years. No matter what surface I put it down on, it wouldn't take long for the G8 to start slip-sliding away. If I were you, I would put a case on it or otherwise just keep a very close eye on it. After all, the last thing you'd want to see is the G8 taking a nasty spill on the floor. You might damage this pretty 6.1-inch display. I have had my issues with LG's plastic OLED displays in the past, but the G8 screen has dodged them all nicely. It's all bright colors and crisp visuals since it runs at 3120 by 1440. And despite how slippery the phone can be sometimes, the screen's 19.5 by 9 aspect ratio means you do get quite a bit of real estate in a package that doesn't strain your hands. That screen isn't all it appears to be though. In its search for ultimate sleekness, LG ditched the traditional earpiece entirely in favor of what it calls a crystal sound OLED. In other words, they turned the whole screen into a speaker. It works surprisingly well for talking to people, at least. The phone calls I took over the past week came through loud and clear, and since the speaker is basically the entire screen, I didn't have to worry about lining my ear up with an earpiece precisely. This oddball screen-speaker combination isn't quite as good when you're listening to music, though. By working together with a single speaker etched into the phone's bottom, the screen is supposed to deliver balanced stereo sound. Instead, what I got was loud but hollow and unsatisfying audio, which is a shame because otherwise this phone might take audio quality more seriously than any other out there right now. Plug in a pair of headphones, for example, and you'll get crisp, super loud audio thanks to the G8's capable hi-fi audio components. Performance and battery have been nothing to sneeze at either. Like the other flagships you can expect to see this year, the G8 packs one of Qualcomm's premium Snapdragon 855 chipsets, this time with 6 gigs of RAM. And yes, that's a little less RAM than what you'd find in devices like the Galaxy S10, but it really doesn't make a difference. In terms of power for multitasking or playing really graphically intense games, the G8 ThinQ can hang with the best of them. And with a 3500 mAh battery tucked away inside, you can usually count on the G8 to stick around for between 1 and 2 full days of use, depending on how hard you push the thing. Things get a little dicier when it comes to the G8's cameras. Around back, you'll find the 12 megapixel main camera with its f1.5 aperture and optical image stabilization, along with a 16 megapixel wide camera that captures a 107-degree field of view. In general, the G8's photos are pretty good. I mean, you'll find quite a bit of detail in these shots, and with HDR or LG's AI cam feature enabled, colors seem pretty bright. No matter which of the cameras you use though, you'll probably notice photos looking a little overexposed, and LG's image processing occasionally makes some photos look unnaturally sharp. New features like a night view mode do help the G8 in the dark, but results aren't nearly as good as what you'd get out of last year's Pixel 3. Long story short, the G8's cameras aren't bad, but they're definitely a notch below what I would have hoped for out of a 2019 flagship phone. There is one more camera we need to talk about though. It's called the Z camera, and it powers the features LG really hoped would set the G8 apart from the pack. It's technically what's called a time-of-flight sensor, and if you're not familiar, it emits and captures infrared light to figure out its distance from a subject and to generate depth information. So, what did LG decide to do with all of that depth data? Obviously, it cooked up some gesture controls, so you can use the G8 without actually having to touch it. These air motion gestures can help you launch certain apps, play and pause songs, take screenshots, and even control the phone's volume. Fair enough, but to do any of those things, you first have to hold your hand between 5 and 8 inches away from the camera, then hope the phone notices. Then you curl your fingers into a sort of claw, hope the phone notices that, and then flick your wrist or close your hand to accomplish whatever small task it is you wanted to complete in the first place. After you get these gestures down, air motion is actually kind of cool, but it's not practical at all. Do you know what can handle just about all of those tasks in less time and with much less hassle? Google Assistant. Voice commands work so much more reliably than air motion here that it's laughable. I have to wonder why LG even bothered with this. LG's Hand ID feature also uses the Z camera to look at the veins in your hand to unlock your phone, which sounds kind of amazing. But just like air motion, it's neat in theory, but a total pain to actually use. Over the past week, I have registered and re-registered my hand several times in hopes of finally getting the feature to work correctly. And on literally my 10th attempt, I finally got it working. That should have been it, right? No, of course not. The real problem is that getting your hand where it needs to be on the first or second or sometimes even third try is nearly impossible. The G8 does give you some on-screen directions, but even those don't help most of the time. More often than not, it took several tries to actually unlock the phone with the palm of my hand. And since Hand ID only works when the screen is on, chances are you're gonna have to touch this phone to wake it up anyway. Like air motion, Hand ID feels like something LG cooked up just to prove that it could, with very little concern for practicality or ease of use. What a waste. At its core, when you strip away some of these really finicky, uneven extras, the G8 is a solid device. But when you consider just how capable, how polished some of the competition is, it's hard to look at everything LG did here and say, man, I have gotta have a G8. Maybe when the price drops and if LG makes some software improvements, this thing could be worth your time. Until then, it is an easy skip.